3 weeks before Clara's 8th birthday, everything I believed about my family exploded in my face. The ranch, the farmhouse, the fields where my grandfather taught me to read soil patterns, they were gone. Sold. Not a word to me. My parents called it finalized. Garrett smirked as if he had played some genius game, and yet my gut screamed that something was off. Something deliberate. I'm Avery Collins, 34, a forensic accountant in Denver, and my daughter, Clara, is 8, observant, perceptive, fearless. She notices the small things, the unspoken tension in a smile, the shift of a voice. That day, she tilted her head and said, "Mom, are they lying about the ranch?" I froze. A chill ran down my spine. "I don't know yet, baby," I whispered, "but we'll find out." The first proof appeared innocuously. A PDF in my inbox from my mother. One line caught my eye. All rights transferred to Garrett. The rest of the document was meticulously drafted, but it screamed intentional deceit. My grandfather had always been precise. He never would have left the estate so carelessly. Someone had manipulated everything. Over the next 3 days, I became a detective, piecing together the subtle threads my family had left exposed. Public records, bank transfers, notarized documents, historical ownership records, each file a puzzle piece. I cross-referenced everything, cataloged every timestamp, annotated every irregularity. By the end, I had a digital fortress of proof. Clara sat beside me, sketching the ranch, the barn, and fields. "Mom, will we get it back?" she asked. I held her hand, heart pounding. "We'll do everything we can, baby, I promise." False hope arrived early. A distant cousin, seeing my frantic search, suggested they might have accidentally overlooked something in the filing. My pulse spiked, but hours later the lead evaporated. My parents had already corrected the error. Near miss. Another lesson. Nothing is accidental in this web of family betrayal. Garrett arrived unannounced one morning. His confidence was a mask, a carefully rehearsed performance. "We need to talk about the estate. It's only fair," he said, smirk in place. I didn't invite him in. I laid out the PDFs, the notarized letters, the bank statements. "The sale was manipulated," I said. "I have proof." For a moment, I saw hesitation in his eyes, a crack in his composure. But he quickly masked it, retreating behind arrogance. Procedural challenges began immediately. Forms misfiled, witnesses hesitant, legal jargon twisted. Each hiccup was a test. Each misstep from my family became a potential exposure point, a trap I had to navigate. Ruth Hart, my attorney, was invaluable. Together we tracked every anomaly, every delay, every subtle maneuver. Days turned into nights, consumed by strategy and research. Clara observed quietly, absorbing lessons she did not yet fully understand. "Mom, they're trying to trick you," she said once. I nodded. "Yes, baby, but we see it now. We're ready." Weeks passed with minor confrontations, subtle manipulations, and constant tension. My parents tried to socially isolate me, whispering to mutual friends, coaching others to doubt my narrative. Patricia Vandross, the manipulative family friend, attempted to destabilize me subtly, sending false tips and misguiding witnesses. I anticipated most, documented all, and slowly began assembling the evidence into an irrefutable dossier. By the 3rd week, I realized the scope of the betrayal. It wasn't just the ranch. It was the mineral rights, the hidden transfers, the carefully concealed bank accounts, all intended to erase me. Each PDF, each letter, each transaction was a piece of a puzzle they assumed I couldn't see. But I could, and I did. The week after I confronted Garrett at my apartment, the tension didn't ease. It escalated. My parents' texts oscillated between fake concern and veiled threats. Garrett alternated between smug confidence and subtle panic, depending on whether he believed I'd uncovered a new transaction or email. Patricia Vandross, lurking in the background, orchestrated subtle manipulations, whispering to witnesses, influencing allies, and keeping the narrative tightly controlled. Each morning began with a ritual: reviewing PDFs, scanning notarized letters, cross-referencing bank transfers, checking timestamps. Clara would join me, sketchpad in hand, her sketches of the ranch more detailed with each day. "Mom, what's this?" she'd ask, pointing to a fence or a silo. "It's part of our legacy," I'd answer, "and we'll make sure it stays ours." Even in the minutiae, her understanding of justice, ownership, and resilience was sharpening. False hope arrived in subtle bursts. A distant cousin emailed, claiming my parents had forgotten to sign a minor deed. I felt my pulse spike. Could this be the breakthrough? Hours later, another email revealed it was a retraction, my parents having corrected the oversight. Another near miss, a reminder that control was always provisional. The legal battle began in earnest. Court summonses, affidavits, and deposition notices arrived in rapid succession. Mistakes were lethal here. One misfiled document could delay proceedings for weeks. Ruth Hart guided me through the chaos, outlining cross-examinations, evidence presentation strategies, and ways to anticipate opposing arguments. The first court hearing was a storm of emotions. My parents arrived, their confident composure masking tension. Garrett smirked but faltered as he caught my gaze. Patricia Vandross, poised and calculating, observed from the corner, her presence a silent threat. Witnesses were called, each hesitant, uncertain, subtly influenced by Patricia's manipulation. The courtroom itself became a character, its polished wood, faint smell of paper, and the almost imperceptible hum of activity heightening the suspense. Witnesses called by my parents attempted to paint me as obsessive and controlling, questioning my motives. But each claim contradicted the documented evidence I presented: PDFs with timestamps, notarized letters from my grandfather, bank transfers, and property deeds. Slowly, the tension shifted. Their narrative began to unravel under scrutiny. Clara's small hand gripped mine in the gallery. She leaned close and whispered, "Mom, are they scared?" I nodded subtly. "Yes, baby. And that means we're winning." Her awareness of the stakes, her quiet participation, added a human dimension to the legal chaos. False victories punctuated the procedural fight. An unexpected ally appeared, ready to testify on our side, only to be intimidated into silence by Patricia's subtle threats. Court-appointed mediators misfiled documents, causing panic. Each near miss reinforced the precariousness of victory. But I adapted, documenting everything, anticipating the next move, and preparing counter-arguments. Emails and phone calls from my parents grew increasingly erratic. One morning, my mother texted, "Avery, we only want what's best for Clara. Don't be difficult." I stared at the screen. There was no mention of fairness or legality, only emotional manipulation. My response was minimal. "We'll discuss when appropriate." Procedural realism became both our weapon and challenge. Delayed filings, missing signatures, hesitant witnesses, contradictory statements, all tested my strategy and patience. Yet each chaos point was anticipated, documented, and used as leverage. The courtroom tension escalated further during cross-examinations. Garrett attempted to assert dominance, but his arguments crumbled under scrutiny. His facial tics, subtle hesitations, and overcompensating gestures betrayed his panic. Patricia Vandross tried a last-minute affidavit, aiming to cast doubt, but it failed under methodical dissection by Ruth Hart. Meanwhile, Clara's observations were invaluable. She noticed small things adults missed: a flicker of guilt in Patricia's eyes, a misstatement by a family friend, hesitation in a witness's body language. One evening she whispered, "Mom, maybe they're afraid you'll find something else." I smiled tightly. "Exactly, baby. And that's why we keep watching." Weeks passed with procedural obstacles and emotional turbulence. Every minor victory was countered by another attempt at deception. Witnesses backed out last minute. Minor errors in filings were exploited. Social allies were intimidated. But my strategy remained intact. Evidence, documentation, and emotional composure were my shields. One night, while reviewing PDFs, I noticed a hidden transaction, a transfer meant to bypass legal oversight. My heart raced. This could have undone months of preparation. Ruth Hart helped me frame it, turning a potential disaster into a pivotal point for cross-examination. The courtroom battle became not just about legality, but about anticipation, strategy, and reading human behavior under pressure. Finally, during a critical hearing, I presented the key PDF that proved all claims against me were fraudulent. The courtroom reacted almost imperceptibly at first, then in waves. My mother's confident facade cracked. Garrett froze mid-argument. Patricia Vandross's poised mask faltered. The judge's pen hovered, then confirmed what the evidence demanded. The mineral rights, property ownership, and estate control were legally and irrevocably mine. Clara's quiet observation, her hand in mine, became a symbol of why this mattered. Her small voice, occasionally asking questions, provided both emotional grounding and clarity in chaos. "Mom, is it over now?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, baby. But we'll always stay vigilant." The following weeks were a blend of cautious reconciliation and careful monitoring. My parents' attempted apologies mingled with defensiveness. Garrett avoided direct contact, but occasionally sent messages. Patricia Vandross was barred from further interference. Social interactions were tense but controlled. Victory was methodical, quiet, and absolute. The ranch remained intact. Clara ran through fields, naming landmarks, asserting her presence. Every PDF, notarized letter, and documented detail had preserved more than property. They had protected legacy, security, and dignity. The days leading up to the final hearing were a tempest of nerves, strategy, and small victories laced with constant fear of collapse. I barely slept, haunted by the knowledge that one overlooked document or misstatement could unravel months of meticulous work. Clara sensed my anxiety, and some nights she curled up beside me, whispering, "Mom, you've got this, right?" Her small faith was a lifeline, a tether to courage I thought I had lost. The courthouse, on the morning of the final confrontation, was charged with anticipation. Parents, brother, and Patricia Vandross arrived with practiced composure, though subtle cues betrayed their tension. Garrett's confident grin faltered with every eye meeting mine. Patricia, poised in her black suit, radiated menace under the fluorescent courtroom lights. Even minor witnesses seemed to quiver as they were sworn in. I began with a deliberate calm, laying out evidence layer by layer. PDFs of fraudulent transactions, notarized letters from my grandfather, bank transfers, property surveys. Each document dismantled a claim. Each sequence of events highlighted manipulation I had painstakingly traced. The courtroom quieted, eyes focused, as each piece of evidence was methodically presented. Clara sat beside me, fingers entwined with mine, silent but intensely aware. Her gaze tracked every subtle movement, the twitch of a brow, a hesitant footstep, the shift of a hand. "Mom," she whispered, almost to herself, "they're scared." I squeezed her hand, a mix of pride and relief washing over me. "Yes, baby, that's why preparation matters." Garrett attempted a final display of dominance, his voice rising, attempting to cast doubt on my motives. I anticipated every word. My cross-examination exposed inconsistencies, contradictions, and false statements. Patricia tried to insert last-minute affidavits, but Ruth Hart dismantled them with surgical precision, turning each attack into another proof of their desperation. The tension was nearly unbearable. Every breath, every pause, every shuffle of papers amplified suspense. Courtroom observers shifted in seats, leaning forward. Some whispered. The judge's pen hovered over the table, authority absolute but restrained. And then it happened. The key PDF, the one that explicitly designated the mineral rights and property ownership solely to me, was displayed. One line, simple yet explosive. All rights, mineral and surface, to be held by Avery Collins. The reaction was immediate. My mother's eyes widened, her smile faltered. Garrett froze mid-breath, color draining from his face. Patricia Vandross slumped slightly, mask cracked, her influence collapsing visibly. Murmurs filled the room as witnesses nodded in recognition, some with relief, others with shock. Authority, assumed for decades, crumbled under truth and evidence. Clara's hand squeezed mine. Her small voice whispered, "Mom, is it really over?" I held her gaze, grounding myself as much as her. "Yes, baby, it's over. And now we're free to build our future." But victory didn't arrive in a single glorious moment. My parents filed motions to appeal minor procedural errors. Garrett attempted to delay filings, and Patricia tried subtle intimidation of witnesses. Each move was anticipated, documented, and neutralized. False hopes arrived in tiny doses, each one a reminder of the precariousness of control, but each one was systematically dismantled. The final legal confirmation arrived weeks later. Ownership of the ranch, all mineral rights, and associated assets were legally and irrevocably mine. Fraudulent LLCs were nullified, bank transfers reversed, and Patricia Vandross faced legal consequences for manipulation and interference. My parents, forced to confront the truth, acknowledged the legitimate intentions of my grandfather's will. Garrett's false assumptions of authority and entitlement were obliterated by documented proof. Clara, the quiet observer and emotional anchor, understood the stakes more than anyone. She explored the ranch with deliberate care, naming landmarks, tracing paths, and asserting her presence. Every act, innocent in appearance, carried symbolic weight, claiming the inheritance, acknowledging the fight that had preserved it, internalizing lessons about trust, vigilance, and resilience. Months later, I reflected on the ordeal. The PDFs, notarized letters, bank statements, and careful tracking had not just preserved property. They had preserved dignity, legacy, and security. The emotional cost had been high: sleepless nights, panic, self-doubt, and fear for Clara's future. But every careful action, every calculated decision had been worth it. Clara's small voice cut through my reflection. "Mom, will they ever try again?" "Yes," I said softly, eyes on her. "But we'll be ready," she replied, fierce and certain. I realized she was right. Preparation, vigilance, and emotional resilience were our shields. Our fight had taught her, and me, that even amidst the most intimate betrayal, strategy, observation, and courage could prevail. The final scene of victory was quiet, yet profoundly emotional. The ranch stood intact under the sunset's glow. Clara ran through fields, laughing, marking the landscape with her imagination. I stood at the barn doorway, absorbing the calm after months of emotional and legal turmoil. The struggle had not been about revenge. It had been about protection, justice, and legacy. The lessons endured. Loyalty is conditional, authority must be questioned, and courage requires both meticulous preparation and emotional fortitude. I had learned that survival in a family of deception is less about confrontation and more about insight, observation, and steadfastness. As we walked the fields together, Clara's hand in mine, I knew this story of betrayal, suspense, and ultimate vindication would shape us forever. We had navigated chaos, survived manipulation, and emerged stronger, wiser, and united. And while the future held uncertainty, we faced it with eyes wide open, grounded in truth, and armed with the lessons of resilience we had earned together.